All right. Thanks for joining our March 15th lecture in our Wilderness Medicine series. In case it's your first time tuning into GALMI here. Started a few years ago to showcase just sort of the diverse application of medical training to our future careers, primarily med students, but pre-meds, residents, attending SAR-techs. I think everyone can gain just an appreciation for like the wide breadth of emergency and wilderness medicine we have here. You can, let's see, follow us on social media platforms here. We also have our website with a list of upcoming lectures and resources, as well as awesome recordings of our previous lectures. Our next one in 2 weeks is on wilderness water treatment. And see, we got a QR code here if you want to join our mailing list. We have some pretty sweet photos, as well as reminders to join the upcoming lectures. So without further ado, I will introduce today's speaker. We've got Chris Van Tilburg here, an American physician, rescue mountaineer, and award-winning author of 11 books. I've read 2 of them, they're excellent, including 2 previous mountain rescue memoirs. Dr. Van Tilburg works in the emergency room in clinic and at a ski resort at the base of Oregon's legendary lethal Mount Hood. He is a medical director for 4 search and rescue teams, chair of Mountain Rescue Association's medical committee, and a USA delegate to the International Commission for Alpine Rescue. He serves as a local public health officer and medical examiner as well. He's worked as an expedition physician on 6 continents, as a cruise ship doctor, as a team leader on 5 humanitarian medical trips to Haiti. From the Wilderness Medical Society, he received the Dion Simpkins Award for service in 2011, Haiti Humanitarian Research Award in 2013, and the Ice Axe Award for service in 2014. He's an emeritus author, editor of Travel Medicine. Sorry, I can't see that last there, news, and emeritus editor of Wilderness Medicine magazine. So I'll stop sharing here and hand it over to Dr. Van Tilburg. If you have any questions during our talk, I'll be monitoring the chat, and so you can throw them in there and we'll have a group Q&A at the end. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Kira. Am I coming through okay? You can hear me? So thanks for that nice introduction, and thanks everybody for coming. Kira, who's in Boston in medical school, is actually a member of my mountain rescue team, and we did a mission just 3 days ago. And so I'm really thankful that Kira asked me to talk about some of the issues we're facing in mountain rescue. I gave this talk, I've given this talk 4 or 5 times, and I gave it to a group in Italy, or sorry, in Switzerland, 6 months ago. And it turns out that this issue I'm going to talk about, which is mainly overcrowding and lack of experience in the mountains, it happens all over the world. Some of the teams in Europe are stressed because of the massive number of people. I mean, when I went to medical school, which was 30 years ago, there were 4 billion people in the world, or 4.5 billion people in the world, and now there's 8 billion people in the world. So it's just a lot of people, and it's hard to keep up with all the people. And so I'm going to talk about some intricacies of Mount Hood, but I'm not going, these are issues that happen all over the world. And hopefully those of you who are young in your career in medical school or residency, or just even, young in your search and rescue career, you'll just kind of understand what kind of some of the issues are we're facing in today's world. So let me see. Are you guys seeing the slideshow or the prep? You guys seeing the show?
Yeah, I think we got the first slide, just the Mount Hood problem there.
But are you seeing the whole slide, or are you seeing the one with the notes? And
no notes, just the slide.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go kind of quick. I got 45 slides. I'm going to go kind of quick. I think it'll take about a half an hour, but I'm going to give you kind of a flavor of what we do on Mount Hood, and then talk about some of the problems and some of the solutions. So this is our busiest year on Mount Hood, I think probably in recorded history. I'm a member of two teams, Portland Mountain Rescue and Hood River Crag Rats. We cover Mount Hood in Oregon. And the Crag Rats have been around since 1926. Portland Mountain Rescue has been around in one form or another since the late 50s. And we had just a crazy busy year in 2022. This is our first mission. Normally our first alpine mission typically comes like April or May, but this is a climber who is on the summit of Mount Hood in distress. And we had a team up there, and he wasn't injured, but he was in distress, and we ran up there, and this is one of our rescue mountaineers. We short roped him and got him down. This is a reminder to tell you all, I don't have any disclosures. And all of these pictures I'm going to show you have been released by the Hood River County Sheriff or the Clackamas County Sheriff. So none of these pictures violate any sort of confidentiality because they're already in the public domain. So, but this is rescuing this guy from Mount Hood. Can you see my mouse there, Kira? No?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the subject over here. This is rendezvousing with Portland Mountain Rescue and trying to get this guy off the mountain. This is in January. Crossing one of the top of the Zigzag Glacier. This is a avalanche prone slope. And so getting him down, we got him down, and the same day we had another mission. This is Portland Mountain Rescue went after this woman who fell 1,000 feet and hurt her knee. And so just crazy busy. So just give you some background, because I think there's people here from all over the US that are tuning in. This is a picture of Mount Hood from the community where I live. And this is in Oregon. And it has an elevation of 11,245 feet. It has a prominence of about 6,000 feet. So what that means is it's up from the geography of 6,000 feet above anything close to it. And you can see way back here in the distance is Mount Jefferson. And so there's probably 20,000 people that try to climb Mount Hood a year from the south side. We don't have accurate stats, but I can tell you on a busy weekend, there's probably close to 1,000 people that are climbing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So it's really, really popular. This is skiing up on the south side of Mount Hood on a summit climb with my mountain rescue buddies. This is what the top of the mountain looks like. This is the climbing up snow ridge here, which is called the Hog's Back. And it goes up through these chutes that are called the Pearly Gates, and it tops out here at the summit. And this is another picture of the climbing route right here, the main climbing route. And this is one of the hazards on Mount Hood. This is this picture is in, I think, February. This is a fumarole. So it's a volcanic fumarole. So this is steam, sulfur, smelling steam that's coming out of the mountain. This is a mission that happened at night. A climber fell into the fumarole, and this is a joint mission between Portland Mountain Rescue and Hood River Crag Rats. And we had to pull a guy with a leg injury out of the fumarole and get him and his buddy off the mountain. And this entire mission happened at night. It was cold, it was windy. This is a mission that made national news. This is two climbers that were stuck with an injury on the Reed Headwall, or that region. And we were able to rescue one, and one unfortunately died. This is a mission for a snowboarder who was missing in the ski area. It was a 3-day search, died. A missing skier who we have not yet found. On Barlow Pass is a 4-day mission. You can see we kind of stretched it out into a couple months to try to find this gentleman. This is a guy who was climbing Munro Point in the Columbia River Gorge in flip-flops and shorts. There's snow on the top of Munro Point, and there's a 5th class rock scramble to get to the top. And he got up there, got cold, had nothing in his backpack, lost his shoes, and we brought him down, making shoes out of Sam splints for him. So, this is a picture of, these are all from last year. And I'm just running through these really quickly to give you an idea of what we're doing. This is my buddy, Ron Martin, and I got called to go to Mount St. Helens, which is about a 2.5 hour drive for us, and mutual aid over to Washington. And we went over there and found a deceased person on the summit of Mount Hood. Can you hear the sound? See if I can turn it down here a little bit. So I was on Mount St. Helens in May, and so just kept going all year long. This is a very common phenomenon in Mount Hood, where people leave their car at midnight because they think they got to get to the summit of the mountain before it warms up and rockfall occurs. The problem is you can't just pick a time to leave your car if you're climbing an alpine peak without taking into the big picture. You know, what's the snow conditions? Is there cloud cover? Is there wind? Is there what the freezing level was the night before? So what happens in this situation, which is the next 3 rescues I'm going to show you, is people leave their car at midnight. It's about a 4 to 5, 6 hour climb to the summit of Mount Hood. They get to the steepest part of the mountain at 6 a.m, and it's bulletproof ice, and they fall, crampon failure, boot failure, ice X failure, whatever. They fall and they can't self-rest and they slide. And so this picture is in May. This is a lenticular cloud on the summit of Mount Hood. This is the same thing. This is 2 weeks later, somebody climbed up to the top of the mountain, got close to the top, and it was bulletproof ice at 6 a.m. And we called the helicopter on this patient. Let me see if I got a picture here. This lady actually fell into the fumarole, which is this crack you're going to see down here in a minute. She fell right into that. Some bystanders pulled her out, and then we were able to get her out with a helicopter. We were to hoist her out with a helicopter, and she fell on bulletproof ice at 6 a.m. because her crampons wouldn't stick into the snow. And I skied to this location without even putting on crampons the whole mission, because by 10 a.m. it was perfect climbing conditions. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how rapidly the mountain changes. This is a week later. 6 days later, same thing. This is on Mount Hood. Somebody climbed to the summit, got up there at 5 a.m. and fell, multiple trauma. This helicopter is the one from the week before, is from the 189th Army National Guard in Salem, Oregon, which is about an hour flight time away. See if I can fast forward this. So this gives you an idea of the conditions on the mountain. This is June on the mountain, so it's definitely a glaciated peak. Okay, so a little discussion about what's happening on Mount Hood, which is kind of happening all over the world. We have some particularities on glaciated peaks, and that's what I've already showed you: the crevasses, the bergschrunds, the fumaroles, glide cracks. This is my buddy Ron, my mountain rescue buddy, ski touring partner. And this is a picture in January of a glide crack in White River. And last year, we hardly ever saw a glide crack. We rarely see glide cracks in the winter. Usually they show up in May, June, July, but this is a big, huge glide crack. This picture, I think, is in January because, it was so warm last year. Any of you who live in the Mountain West know that January through February is very warm. We have a fair bit of avalanches. This is an avalanche in a very popular ski location. During the pandemic, I witnessed 2 skier triggered avalanches. Nobody was hurt. This is something that happens in the Northwest. Unfortunately, these are rain runnels. This is it's quite beautiful. This is actually a good ski day because it rained, and these troughs are formed from the rain, and they're about a foot deep. And then there's a dusting of about 3 and 4 inches of snow on the top. So it was actually a pretty good ski day. Lenticular clouds occur on the glaciated peaks, and this picture was in a warm. It was actually in, I think, January, but the Warm air comes off the Pacific Ocean, comes in over the forest, hits the snow and condenses. And that's basically what we call cloud cap. And this is a picture of my two buddies. This is Meredith and Ron, my two mountain rescue and ski friends. And this is a cloud cap that descended. It was quite a warm cloud, but it's happens, just another weather hazard. And then finally, the Mount Hood Triangle. And so what happens on glaciated volcanoes is you can see the parking lot where our truck is right here. And I'm taking this picture from about ready to ski down to the truck from about 10,000 feet. But because these mountains are cones, you know, and they're triangle shaped cones, that if you are ski down the fall line, you won't go back to the parking lot. You'll ski down to the wrong direction into a canyon that you can't get out of. It's called the Mount Hood Triangle, because a cone, if you're only off by 1 degree at 10,000 feet and you go down, 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 you get further and further away from your car. And so in a whiteout, this happens all the time. Happened last year. Portland Mountain Rescue fetched somebody who went into Zigzag Canyon who there was a bad weather, poor visibility. And if you don't know to follow magnetic south on your compass, you won't get back to the parking lot. But here's the real reason I wanted to talk about this subject today, and it's massive numbers of people. And this is a picture in February of 2022. And these chutes here, this is the most popular alpine peak to climb in the entire world. There's, like I said, 1,000 people that climb it on a weekend. These chutes are too narrow to pass, so you can't pass people. If I have my skis on my backpack in diagonal fashion, the ski tips will hit the wall of the chute. So these chutes are maybe 3 feet wide. And just massive number of people. And what happens occasionally is people are roped together. And if you don't know how to short rope, which is a guide technique, or you don't know how to put in a running belay, which is an anchor, if 3 people are roped together and one falls, it's impossible to stop that falling person. So people are using a glacier travel technique on a steep slope, which requires a different technique. So that happens occasionally in Mount Hood. Somebody falls on a rope team and their whole rope team falls. So it's just really, really crowded on Mount Hood. Here's another problem we run into. This is another buddy of mine, mountain rescuer. This is the 6th binding in a decade that I've had break in the field. And it's because we all want lighter gear. We love light gear, but to make equipment lighter, you'd have to use really expensive, high-tech, fancy materials, or you just have to make them less durable. And that's mostly what happens. And so equipment failure we see on Mount Hood, we see crampons fail, we see skis fail. So it's a real issue. Here's another really popular thing. If you follow FKT's fastest known time, you probably know that during the pandemic in trail running, there were more FKT set than any previous year, because being competitive athletes, the trail runners had no competitions to do, right? So they all competed with each other by trying to do routes faster than each other. So FKTs, this is a pretty amazing feat of athleticism. I was on the mountain this day and I saw this guy in the parking lot and I thought he was a nut. I had no idea what he was doing, but he summited Mount Hood and skied down from the parking lot in an hour and 40 minutes. It's just crazy, amazing feat. Like, you know, if I'm going fast with my buddies, we're going really fast. We get up in 3.5 hours, and then it takes about 45 minutes to ski down if you stop for pictures and whatnot. But an hour and 45 minutes is crazy. But this guy, you can see he's not really prepared for adversity. So, you know, and sometimes people get hurt and it's not even their fault. Somebody else falls and runs into them. In fact, Timberline Mountain Guides, which for a long time was the only guide service on Mount Hood, they've been around for decades. They stopped in 2021. They stopped guiding Mount Hood on weekends. And if you know anything about the guide industry, weekends are their bread and butter, right? That's when people have time off to hire guides to go on their weekend junkets. And they stopped guiding on weekends because it's just too dangerous. Here's another thing, this is a whole thing we could talk about, social media. I was in the parking lot during the pandemic. The only time out of probably, 20 or 25 summits in Mount Hood, the only time I climbed solo was in the pandemic. I climbed it solo once. And when I say solo, there's still 50 people on the mountain. But I was in the parking lot and I saw a guy. It wasn't this guy, but I saw a guy dressed in micro spikes, running tights, had a 10-liter running vest on, and was holding a little tiny ice axe. And I looked at him, I was like, "You going for the summit?" And he was like, "Yeah, I think so." He said, "But I'm going to turn around if it looks bad conditions." And he didn't. He turned around at the summit, but what took me 2 hours of skiing very quickly by myself uphill, it took him like 45 minutes to run up. I mean, he was really fast, but this is a problem with social media because people read this post and they think, oh, you can climb Mount Hood in running spikes. That's a thing. So I'm going to do it. Right. So, but it's not a thing. Like being on a glaciated peak with open bergschrunds and open crevasses in running shoes is not a thing, but that happens now on Mount Hood. Happens on Mount St. Helens too. This is Mount St. Helens in February. February, normally, traditionally we see on a busy weekend, 20, 30 people skiing up there. And this is a busy weekend in February in 2021, I think. And there's 300 or 400 people on the mountain. And so here's the other side of it. So this is looking down. This is looking up Mount St. Helens to the summit, and this is looking down. We went on a mission. The Craig Rats went on a mission to Mount Rainier. This is the only picture I had that felt like I could show that didn't show the people who we rescued. But this is on the Muir snowfield on Mount Rainier. And if you've ever been in the spring up to, or the summer, winter, spring up to Mount Rainier, Paradise is at 6,000 feet, and there's an old lodge there. It's quite beautiful, and there's a sledding hill, and there are gobs of people up there enjoying the mountains, and there are probably 500 or 600 people on a weekend day, and probably 450 of them do not and should not venture more than 300 feet from their car. So they go up into the little sledding hill and goof around, and it's probably really fun. But we went after two guys that saw skiers going uphill, and they were in tennis shoes and cotton sweatpants and little tiny day packs. And they saw people skiing uphill, and they thought, oh, we can just start walking. And they just walked and walked and walked. And pretty soon they were at 8,000 feet, and it was dark, and they were cold, and they were injured. And so we went after them. So I'm going to just show you some pictures of kind of how we're addressing this in the Cragrats and in Portland Mountain Rescue. And I know that some of our colleagues in other teams are struggling with this same issue. So this is kind of the solutions, what we're doing now. And this is, I'm really impressed and honored to be a part of Portland Mountain Rescue, because we have a number of just incredibly great rescue mountaineers, but we also have just a fabulous outreach team for public. So both Cragrats and Portland Mountain Rescue are part of the Mountain Rescue Association, which is a national organization that was formed in 1955 actually on Mount Hood. And part of the Mountain Rescue Association mission is saving lives through mountain rescue, and the other half is saving lives through education. Portland Mountain Rescue has a media team that's incredible. So, of course, we have Facebook and Instagram. We have a partnership with basically the premier outdoor shop in Portland, Oregon, which is the metro area, is about 3 million people. The Mountain Shop. So we do collaboration and lectures and whatnot. We have a rescue radio podcast, which is really cool. I gave a talk on avalanche airbags on it once, and then we have a YouTube site. And so this outreach is really, really important, and Portland Mountain Rescue does it enough that they have kind of a following, and I think people probably look for it, and it's objective data, which is really important. It's not things like, hey, I climbed Mount Hood in microspikes for the first time, look at me, I'm pretty cool. It's things like the bergschrunds opened, we recommend you go climbers right around the Bergstrand. So, really good, solid, factual information followed by a recommendation from experts. So that's really the best way to handle social media, because, all of you know that social media is all over the board. And many of you, if you're in medical school and residency, you probably had patients who, come in and say, I read on social media that X, Y, or Z. So it's really important. The second thing is, one of the things we're doing, all the people, is we're getting a lot of help. And so our sheriff deputies who run missions will call multiple agencies. They'll call mountain rescue teams, Portland Mountain Rescue and Crag Rats. Sometimes we call for mutual aid from mountain rescue teams elsewhere in Oregon. There's 5 mountain rescue teams in Oregon. And so, 2 of them are 3-hour drive away, but we have asked them last year in 2022, we asked them for help on 2 missions. We have ground SAR teams that are incredibly skilled, that generally don't go above timberline, but they help in other ways. We have the private ski resorts help. We have 2 military units that help missions. So we have a lot of people. And so how do you manage all these rescuers on these missions? Well, use the incident command system. So this is a sample I made on a mission for a body recovery, but the idea behind this is being able to have multiple teams work together in a unified structure to be able to communicate and maximize efficiency. So the incident command system, this really came into widespread popularity after 9/11. And it was actually, there's a presidential mandate that if you are a first responder and you get federal funds, you have to use incident command system, because during 9/11 in 2001, there were so many agencies that it was like chaos. And so they were having trouble communicate. We're really trying to bolster our training, our medical training. This is a class that my colleague at Portland Mountain Rescue, Pierce Beisinger, and I orchestrated. This is a emergency medical responder course. So this is, if many of you have probably heard of wilderness first responder, which is sometimes abbreviated WOLFR. So this is the same thing, except for it is a state approved course that leads to a license in the EMS system. And so we just taught our 2nd annual course and of 30 rescuers. And so these are people that can then get licensed under the EMS system. And those teams that are under my medical direction then get an EMS license to provide EMS services. So we are bolstering our mountain rescue skills. We had probably 10 years ago, we had a couple ski patrollers, 10 or 12 years ago, we had 4 or 5 ski patrollers join our mountain rescue team. And they were very proficient at this litter here, you see, which is a type of toboggan, which is primarily used in the United States by just ski patrol. It's called an Akia, but we kind of saw a need to improve our ski mountaineering and our ski rescue skills. And so we now have probably 15 people trained on bringing this litter down the mountain with either a live load, or in this case, this is a body recovery. But to give you an idea, to get somebody down 3,000 feet with a rope down a low angle, say 30-degree slope, with a rope lower for 3,000 feet takes 2.5 hours. And this skiing them down takes about 20 minutes. So it's a gigantic time saving device. Although getting this device up the mountain is not easy, because you got to carry it up. So we are really bolstering our regular patrols on the mountain. So Portland Mountain Rescue has a patrol team on the mountain, probably almost every weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, and lots of times on Fridays and sometimes on Thursdays. And so Crag Rats have done this somewhat, but this is basically a patrol team that is basically checks in with the sheriff and says, hey, we're going to have 5, 6, 7 people up there climbing, skiing. We're going to just go up there for fun, or we're going to go up there and train, but we'll be available for missions. And this cuts our response time down significantly. So you can imagine, Mountain Hood is staging area for most of the alpine missions is an hour drive from my house. So you can imagine if I'm home, like right now, if I got a mission, I would have, get my stuff together, take me 10, 15 minutes and meet up with my buddies at the county yard where we jump in our truck and it's an hour drive, maybe, 45 minutes driving fast. But if you're already on the mountain in your ski gear, halfway up the mountain, you can see how the response times is dramatically decreased. So patrol teams has been just really incredibly helpful, especially with Portland Mountain Rescue, because it's just such a regular thing. Recruiting is really tough. We try to, everybody has different recruiting techniques. This is a picture of the Crag Rats back in, we were formed in 1927. So this picture is probably from late or mid 20s or early 30s. And so recruiting is really challenging because none of us have time in the Crag Rats to teach people to be rescue mountaineers. We kind of have to find people who are skiers and climbers and have these techniques and skills first. And then we got to see if they are good fit, with our team mojo, so to speak, because if it's 3 a.m. and it's snowing and you're at 10,000 feet. And even if your only job is just to ski downhill to get home because the mission's over, you still have to, you're trusting your teammates. And so recruiting is definitely challenging. Permit system, it's crazy that Mount Hood is just getting its first permit system, despite many other volcanoes in the Northwest have permit systems to climb. So Rainier, Denali, well, Denali's not a volcano, but Denali, Rainier, Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, Three Sisters, Wilderness Area, Shasta. I mean, you all need climbing permits for all of those mountains. So Mount Hood is getting its first climbing permit system next season. And we're hoping that it will sort of lessen the number of missions we have. I don't know. I mean, we haven't had as many missions this year yet because we have an incredibly great ski season and it's been stormy and we've had a lot of powder snow. So we have fewer people out climbing the mountain and more people are skiing right now, but we'll see what happens with the permit system. So a couple frequently asked questions. We just got done with the Alpine season last year and we just went right into the summer season with not even, a breath of break. And this is a water rescue we did on the Hood River. And so people ask me, how it impacts us. I mean, we definitely, give up part of our personal life to do this, but it's the camaraderie and the reward is unparalleled in anything else I do. And so it's just a great sense of camaraderie and accomplishment. And, sometimes we don't have good outcomes, but most of the time we do. So we do have a little bit of rescuer stress, but we don't tend to have that much. We don't tend to address it as well as we could. I'm not going to go in this in detail because many of you are medical folks. If you want, I can follow up with an email to Kira about what I carry in my ALS kit if you're interested. This is actually an EKG from last year of a guy, let's see, Ron, my buddy Ron and I went up as a hasty team on a guy who was hiking on a trail and had chest pain. And we ran up to him, got to him. We were the first two responders, and an AED doesn't have EKG capability. Our team has an AED, but we basically all we did is gave him an aspirin, and we're walking him down the trail, and then we were about a mile from the trailhead when the EMS crew from the fire department came up with a EKG, and he was having a STEMI, ST elevation. Myocardial infarction, so heart attack. So it does happen. I carry an ALS kit. I tend to use the thing I use the most out of my ALS kit is ketamine. I've already used it twice this year. How am I indemnified? Well, so our mountain rescue team is insured by the county sheriff, the county general liability insurance. Our SAR team has policy. We are well protected by the Good Samaritan law in Oregon. Our Oregon Good Samaritan law specifically says If you're a first responder, you're immune from civil liability as long as you're not grossly negligent. And then I also have medical director insurance through the Wilderness Medical Society. So I'm probably better insured for this volunteer, non-paying job that I do than any other job that I have. And then lastly, well, 2 more slides and then we're done. So I've only been talking about 30 minutes. So that's pretty good. 2 more things. One is how are we funded? We rely heavily on donations. We have some rental income. The Craigrats have some rental income. We have the sheriff departments support us to different extents. Craigrats and Portland Mountain Rescue have different sort of, we get different amount of support from our sheriff departments. We get grants once in a while. The picture of the EMR class I showed you, that was all funded through a grant from COVID money for disaster preparedness. So there's grant money out of there. And then, of course, we all pay out of pocket for our own rescue gear, our own packs and whatnot. And then this is a big subject that comes up every once in a while. Can we charge for search and rescue? Generally, in the United States, we don't have that culture. There are some ground fire departments that will charge for search and rescue. There are ski resorts that will charge for search and rescue. Generally, sheriff departments don't charge for search and rescue. They can't. There's 5 or 6 states that have the ability to, but most don't. So that was all I have. We've got, that was about 35 minutes. I'm happy. I don't know, Kara, do we have time for a few questions or?
Yeah,
Okay.
fire away. Nothing's come up in the chat yet, but yeah, anyone wants to throw any in there or speak up, you're welcome to. I know one question I had was, I know you spent a lot of time in Europe. Do you see the same issues there that you see in the US with like the overcrowding?
Well, in the Alps, it's crazy crowded. I mean, it's jam-packed in the Alps. There's people everywhere because their ski culture and their mountain culture dates back like hundreds and hundreds of years. Some of the alpine huts in Europe are 200 years old. And so it's crowded in Europe. They have their mountain rescue system is much different than ours because it's helicopter based. And they all have rescue insurance, or most of them have rescue insurance. So the rescue situation is a little bit different, but it's very crowded. And then my friends in Catalonia, when I was at a big mountain rescue meeting in Switzerland this past fall, they have the same problem, exact same problem I just discussed. And they call it the Kilian-Jorneau syndrome, which, if you know, Kilian-Jorneau is probably the world's best trail runner and best ski mountaineers. And they have the exact same problems we have. And when I gave this abbreviated version of this talk at a meeting in Europe, and they were like, we've got the social media problem, we've got massive people, we have people underprepared. In Spain, their whole country was on lockdown for 2 or 3 months. And so they went berserk to get out to the mountains when they had the chance after COVID. So it's same problems that we have, different mountain rescue system.
Thank you for this talk. I was curious whether with sort of like the proliferation of these like new features on cell phones, like on the iPhone, to like call emergency services, sometimes like without the person, actually doing that themselves, and like their new like emergency calls by satellite, whether you've seen sort of like an uptick in those sorts of reports, and maybe like false positives that like think somebody's gotten an accident, but they haven't.
We see that 1 or 2 times a year, probably. We have, especially when, this has been going on for probably 7 or 8 years, when the spot locators and the Garmin inReaches came out. The emergency distress call would go accidentally get hit in their, triggered in their backpack. They wouldn't know it. The emergency signal goes to the FCC, it goes to the sheriff department. We go up the trail. I can think of one come a couple of years ago. We went for a guy, I think on Huckleberry Mountain up by Lost Lake on Mount Hood, and we walked up to him. He was in his tent sleeping, and we were like, "Hey, we're mountain rescue." And he's like, what are you guys doing here? There's nothing wrong with me. So our dispatch has had this massive run on the iPhone 14 false alarms, which probably many of you are aware of, but like dispatches all over the Mountain West, because that iPhone 14 has the deceleration warning sign that automatically calls 911. And so that's been happening this winter. And I think dispatch, I'm not exactly sure what they do now, but I believe they make one call back to that phone. And if they don't get an answer, they figure it's a false alarm. But yeah, I mean, that's modern technology, right? And we also have people who call us on cell phones when they don't really need us, or they wouldn't call us, or they could probably get down on their own.
Thank you.
We got a question in the chat here. How and why did you get into specialty? We got a backcountry skier and ski patroller who loves your work and would much like to aspire to be working in a field like you.
Well, I got into wilderness medicine way back in 1997 or 96 when I was in medical school. I was interested in I kind of randomly, accidentally stumbled upon the specialty when I was researching a research project I was doing in Ecuador. So I got into it for the love of outdoors, which is probably why everybody gets into it. I can tell you that, there are a lot of formal training programs now for wilderness medicine. When I was training, I had to just kind of make up my own training. I had to work on a ski patrol for 6 weeks to get training and that kind of thing. But I can tell you that if you're young in your career and you want to do what I do, getting patient care experience is really the most important thing. And you can go to lectures and you can go to talks and you can take electives where you do hands-on drills, which is fabulous, but you got to get patient care experience somehow. And so I went to Haiti 5 times. I was a cruise ship doctor specifically so I could get on an Antarctic cruise as a physician, expedition vessel, and they wouldn't take any physicians who hadn't first had cruise ship experience. So I was cruise ship doctor on Holland American Line in the Caribbean. So, and it was a fabulous experience professionally. So yeah, so try to get patient care experience somehow. Oh, I think you're on mute, Kira.
Thanks. All right, we have someone from Bend, Oregon, who is wondering if you have any talks or training in the area. Teaches part-time for Adventure Medics, and be great if you'd present for us sometime.
Well, as part of the Mount Hood Search and Rescue Council, we have had some regional lecture talks. Basically, we had one last year on hypothermia, and it was actually quite successful. We basically, my buddies, my two rescue friends of mine got together and did a talk and invited everybody we possibly could think of within 200 miles so we could have some kind of regional approach to hypothermia. But yeah, I mean, I do occasionally have trainings and whatnot. So you can get my contact information from Kira if you want.
On mute again. Okay. We have someone from Australia as the chair of their National Ski Patrol Medical Advisory Committee. Do you have any set training standards for your patrollers and rescuers, and how often do you need to rectify?
The only training, I'm only really over medical. So we do have training standards for medical. So everybody who's field deployable has to be first aid trained and CPR trained. So every 2 years. And then if you are licensed, so, in the United States, it's through the emergency medical service systems. Depending on what skill set you have and what license you hold, you have to have recertification every 2 years. So it might be 12 hours of training every 2 years. It might be 50 hours of training every 2 years. So I tend to try to make sure people know the basics really well and then sort of expand from there, because if you If everybody knows the basics, then you're probably at least have a core to build upon. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but.
Great. If anyone has any last questions here, feel free to throw them in the chat or speak up. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today, Chris. That was great. And yeah, I'd love to have you shoot your ALS kit our way, and maybe we can send it out in our next GALME email. So
Sure, I'll send it to you.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. Good job.
Thanks, Ron.